Welcome to Pinsar Basketball Live. In this very special early morning live, we are going through NBA history, the last 45 years, the last 45 drafts, right up to 2023, the last draft, the Victor Wembanyama draft. And we're going to talk about the best player in every single draft from 1978. You probably guess who that guy is. 1979, you can definitely guess who that guy is, to maybe some drafts that you might have forgotten about a little bit. The title sounds fire. Absolutely. Good morning to you as well. I know that from our analytics that we have a lot of subscribers who are not in North America. So I know that doing a live at 3:20 may not be great for the analytics, 3:20 a.m., but we're probably going to have about 100 people in here at some point from Asia, from Europe, etc. Hopefully catch some people on their way to work in the morning. Hey, man, let's get to it. Okay, let's start with 1978. And we'll do a little bit of a quick flash of the player. And hopefully this is going to be an hour of just jam-packed information. And if you're someone out there who often gets into debates with the old heads about who Clyde Drexler was, how great he was, and Sidney Moncrief, you're talking about a lot of people. Okay, we hit the button, y'all. Thank you so much, Barnes of Scotty. Appreciate that, man. If you ever find yourself in debates with old heads, it might help to understand who your grandfather watched play basketball and how good that player really was. And we'll try to be a little bit fair, provide you a little bit of context. I have watched a ton of 80s basketball, 90s basketball. I got to tell you, 70s and 60s, not really my jam. Apart from the greats of the greats, I got to tell you, there's a lot of gaps. And one summer, I promise you, I'm going to go back and like absorb and inhale 70s and 60s. Yes, I am. Do you ever worry about falling asleep on a stream? Hell no. No, not at all. I am very wide awake. I got my coffee. Let's get to it. Okay. Let's get to this. Okay, so let's start with 1978. No surprises here. It is a Larry Legend, Larry Bird. Okay, 12-time All-Star, three-time NBA champ, 10 times All-NBA. You know, there was a debate the other day about what's more impressive, 10 finals appearances for LeBron James or 20 All-Star selections. People said easy, 10 finals appearances. Honestly, the 20 All-Stars is pretty damn rare, okay? It's pretty damn rare to be that good for that long. Larry Legend also has 3 MVPs, obviously a huge Boston Celtics legend. And yeah, yes, we're definitely going to use value for replacement to sort these players out. And yeah, I mean, the next closest runner-up was Mo Cheeks. My earliest memories of Mo Cheeks is obviously as a coach because I'm a little bit younger. And yeah, he's been a hell of a coach as well. Michael Ray Richardson is 3rd. Michael Cooper, hell of a defender, was 4th. Reggie Theus, Michael Thompson. Holy crap, man. This is going way back. Okay, let's go on to the next draft. And we're going right to Magic Johnson. Honestly, your old heads, your grandfather might tell you that Magic Johnson and Larry Bird saved the NBA. And they're not lying. They're not wrong. A valuable replacement of 80 for Magic Johnson, and no slouch in terms of his resume. He was a 2-time MVP, 12-time All-Star, Hall of Famer, obviously 4-time assist champ, 10-time All-NBA, 3-time MVP, 2-time All-Star MVP, 3-time MVP, and 3 times Finals MVP. He won 5 NBA championships, and we know a player who was drafted somewhere, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who won some of those MVPs, those Finals MVPs in his place. But certainly a hell of a freaking career, man. He averaged 19 points, 11 assists, and 7 rebounds in his career. Shot 30% from 3, 85% from the line. Threes were not really a huge part of Magic's game. Honestly, he started attempting a little bit more of them later in his career. Unfortunately, they put it right there, HIV, illness. Unfortunately, his career was cut short. One can only imagine. He was still a hell of a player, man. Like in 1993, he was still a very capable player. Unfortunately, stigmatized the league. A lot of controversy. Karl Malone not wanting to play, a lot of stigma about that stuff. But Unfortunate that his career was cut a little bit short, but man, from the college career to the basketball career, I mean, to the NBA career, he was really one of one. And some people would still say, and probably rightfully so, that he is still the greatest point guard of all time. That's 1979. Let's go to 1980. And who is the valuable replacement guy here? Tops. It's a big drop off, man. Kevin McHale. Honestly, huge part of those Celtics championships and a mighty post player, a guy who is talked about till this day, a 7-time All-Star. Where, not every draft is going to contain an MVP. This draft, it didn't contain an MVP. So we got a 6-time All Defense. 70. He's a top 75 player, of course. 2-time Sixth Man of the Year. He won. He was on the All Rookie team. He's a 3-time NBA champ. Obviously, huge part of those Boston Celtics teams. But yeah, not the strongest draft, and certainly you're going to see how this draft pales in comparison to drafts like 1984, 1996, 2003, where there were just like a ton of guys who racked up those valuable replacement shares. Okay, moving on to the 1981 NBA draft, and we got Larry Nance and Isaiah Thomas. Honestly, Larry Nance, not often remembered for being nearly as good as he is. I think he's often buried. Had a huge impact, man. Defensively, offensively, people remember from the dunk contest, man. Father of course, Larry Nance Jr. But yeah, I mean, I think it would surprise a lot of people that despite playing fewer games than Isaiah Thomas, he was the valuable replacement leader. You have Mark Aguirre, Danny Ainge, Buck Williams. I mean, this is not exactly the strongest draft here, but Larry Nance being at the top of this, I mean, geez. Yeah, it's like you think of dunkers, you think of Larry Nance, you think of Chocolate Thunder, you think of Dominique Wilkins, think of Vince Carter, Michael Jordan. That's pretty much it. Blake Griffin, Jason Richardson. I think there's a few dunkers that you really think. Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan a little bit. I mean, yeah, but Larry Nance was the OG when it came to the dunk contest. Dr. J, of course, we got to think about Dr. J, but Larry Nance, 3-time All-Star, 3-time All-Defense, no championships, no MVPs, but a hell of a player. If you want to talk about like greatness, I think you can probably say this is the first year where value replacement probably loses out, because I think that in the first time I'm going to go against value replacement and go for Isaiah Thomas here. Just a better career. 3-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA, 2-time All-Star MVP, a Finals MVP, two NBA championships with the bad boy Pistons. He was huge, right? Again, how does valuable replacement, factor in all of the defense? Maybe defense is the one place where analytics are a little bit weak. I think Isaiah Thomas was the best player in this draft class, to be completely honest with you. Well, let's move on to the 1982 NBA draft. Yeah, I mean, in sincerity, as great as Larry Nance was, I don't think anyone is going to put him over Isaiah Thomas. Okay, so that's the first place where value replacement is definitely wrong on that. Dominique Wilkins. Debatable, right? Dominique Wilkins versus James Worthy. Who do you prioritize? You prioritize the individual performance, you prioritize being a part of a team. James Worthy was a hell of a player. Played with Michael Jordan at UNC and was a really big part of those championship runs. But I think Dominique Wilkins probably gets the edge here. Championships are not everything in the world. He was a 9-time All-Star. He was a huge part of those dunk contests. And honestly, you got to consider contributions to the game, right? Did Vince Carter win any championships? No. Did he contribute more to the game than probably Joe Dumars? Hell yes, of course. Impact is measured through the growth of the game. Dunking is a huge part of popularizing the game. I think Dominique Wilkins was at the forefront of that, had a bunch of those battles with Michael Jordan. They are iconic, and I encourage anybody to go back and watch them. They were awesome. Some people might accuse him of doing the same dunk too many times, but I got to say, he was a hell of a player. 9-time All-Star, 7-time All-NBA. He was a scoring champion in 1985-86. Not easy to do with Michael Jordan in the league, man. Of course, a member of the 75th anniversary team. Consider the alternative James Worthy, who was the number 1 pick in this draft. He was 1980. He was the Finals MVP the year I was born. 2-time All NBA, 7-time All Star, 3-time NBA champion. It's debatable between these two, but I give the edge to Dominique. Let's move on to the 1983 NBA draft. It's funny how sometimes you just have drafts where, like, the year before the great one, you get a soft one. And this was definitely a softer one. Okay. Apart from Clyde Drexler, he was honestly an all-time great who is often overshadowed. Now, I've often wondered, why was he overshadowed? Was it, like, there's a ton of reasons that you can say, right? He was the 14th overall pick. Right. This is the first instance we're seeing where a guy who was picked like outside the top 10 really rose to the top, right? 10-time All-Star, 5-time All NBA. Prior to Michael Jordan, probably considered the greatest shooting guard in the NBA at the time. Some people actually compared the two very favorably, said they were like the top 2 shooting guards in the league. They really were, right? And I think, if I'm being completely honest, I've thought about this for a really long time. Why does Clyde Drexler not get more love? I think it has a little bit to do with the fact that he only won 1 championship and that he was a little bit further on in his career when he won that championship with Houston and Hakeem Olajuwon. He wasn't like the guy, right? He was a little bit removed from his like apex prime, right? If you want to take a look at his career overall, right? Like, I mean, he was still like a solid dude, but he was far removed from 1988, 27 points per game. I mean, for that championship team, he averaged 21 points per game. He was solidly the second option behind Hakeem Olajuwon. He was a really huge part of that team, right? But he was 33 years old. And I feel like when you win it late, it kind of taints your career a little bit, right? It's not like he didn't make it to the finals. He did make it to the finals before. He just didn't win with Portland, right? I believe Portland made it to the finals, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, I think he was a really solid player, man. Honestly, it's not even close on this draft, like who was the best player in this draft. If there is any, I guess you could say Byron Scott deserves a little bit of credit for the team success, a three-time NBA champion, but really more as a role player, a tertiary 4th option type of guy. Racked up a ton of win shares being on better teams, but yeah, let's move on. Now here comes the GOAT draft. Probably some people would say the greatest draft of all time. I think some people would say 1996 gives it a run in terms of depth, but you're going to see this is not even debatable, right? Michael Jordan, right? You got Michael Jordan, John Stockton, Charles Barkley, Hakeem Olajuwon, Sam Perkins, who a lot of people really forget as the original stretch big. I remember Sam Perkins. I used to play with Sam Perkins in NBA 2K. 2K is the original 2K. He was on Indiana at the time. Otis Thorpe. Like, there's a lot of good players in this draft, but really it's those top 4, right? The separation is enormous for those top 4 players. And clearly, if we're talking like the greatest player in the draft, clearly it's the greatest player of all time, Michael Jordan. Hall of Fame, 14-time All-Star, 3-time Steals champion, hell of a defender, 6-time undefeated in the finals, NBA champion, 5-time MVP, 6 times finals MVP, 9-time All-Defense, All-Rookie, Rookie of the Year, Steals champion, All-NBA, All-Star MVP. My God, like the accolades are so crazy with this dude, right? He averaged 30 points per game on his career. That's including those 2 Wizards years that he had, where his percentages really dropped. I mean, here's something. Like, the original LeBron James, before LeBron James, doing this he was an all-star at the age of 39, right? Granted, the final all-star wasn't voted in. Vince Carter got voted in over him. Vince gave up his spot. We all remember that. So, yeah, I just think, this is not even close. But it is worth noting. That despite never winning a championship, John Stockton was second. I don't think he ever gets credit for being second. And I think it's like, whether you're talking box plus minus, whether you're talking value of a replacement, whether you're talking win shares, he was the number 2 guy in this draft. Why was he the number 2? Why was he the number 2 guy in this draft? I feel like the edge on Barkley goes on taking care of his body and longevity, right? Peak Barkley, in my opinion, was better than John Stockton. That might be a little bit debatable for some people. I don't think it's that debatable. I just think that Barkley, frankly, was like, I mean, Barkley made it to the finals with the Phoenix Suns, went up against Michael Jordan, got beat, like everybody got beat. Hakeem Olajuwon did not make it to the finals to face Jordan. They joke that had that ever happened, that Jordan's streak would be, disrupted. I don't necessarily buy that, but it is worth noting that Michael Jordan probably in his Bulls never really faced like a dominant center. And that to me is like, it's very interesting. Like, because I mean, okay, yeah, they did in the East, right? They faced Patrick Ewing in the East. They faced Alonzo Mourning in the East. But in the finals, when you think about it, there was Greg Ostertag with the Utah Jazz. So, and I mean, like the one time that Michael Jordan did get beat, they did get beat in the playoffs during his, famous Bulls run. It was against Shaquille O'Neal. So it's worth saying Shaquille O'Neal proceeded to get whooped by Hakeem Olajuwon. So what does that say? I guess it leaves a little bit of a door open to some revisionist history to say, what if the timing had been different? Had Hakeem and the Rockets or David Robinson and the Spurs or something like that made it to the finals in the wrong year, would Michael Jordan's team have been equipped to stop those guys with Luke Longley, Bill Cartwright, etc.? I don't know. I just feel like, as a fan of Michael Jordan, I just feel like this is a guy who would have found a way. Maybe that's just me being, wishful. But John Stockton, a hell of a career, man. Like a hell of a career. 10-time All-Star, 9 times assist champ. Some people say probably the runner-up to, the greatest point guard of all time behind Magic Johnson. Some people would say that mantle has been broached by Steph Curry, and I think I would agree with that. But 5-time All-Defense, 2-time Steals champ. Honestly, one of the best defensive point guards. That Stockton pick and roll was absolute money. Hakeem Olajuwon, really just a lot of losing early in his career. Often accused of being a bit of a selfish player. He didn't really make players better around him. 12-time All-Star, right? 2-time NBA champion. He definitely won a scoring title, didn't he? At some point? No. 3-time block champion, 12-time All-Star, 12-time All-NBA. I mean, 2 times Finals MVP. He was actually an MVP in 93, 94, the first year Jordan retired. So hell of a career, hell of a peak. Kind of fizzled out a little bit late. Injuries, knees, etc. Got a little bit big. I do think it's worth saying that a lot of these players, they did come into the draft and they came into the NBA a lot later in their careers, right? So ironically, if you're a Raptor fan watching this, Scottie Barnes is about as old as most of these guys when they first came into the league right now, right? If you follow us on Twitter, I posted a picture of LeBron James at the draft 2003, which we're certainly going to get to. And I said Scottie Barnes was 2 years old when this photo was taken. Relax, right? Okay, we are in the 1985. Also a pretty damn solid draft. You got Karl Malone, Patrick Ewing, the infamous rigging of getting New York, their center, their man in the middle. When you compare it, in terms of value of a replacement, how much was Ewing benefiting from being in New York? A tremendous amount, man. Karl Malone literally had twice the value of a replacement over Ewing. I feel like they were put in the same breath a little too often, and I feel like because of all the controversy surrounding Karl Malone, none of which I will ever defend because I think the guy is a piece of shit personally. But I mean, again, if you're not familiar with the story, you're just going to think I'm hating on the guy. But Google at your own discretion. Some of the shit that came out about him, about his kids, about potentially, not potentially, definitely getting a 13-year-old girl pregnant when he was a grown man. Frankly, it's quite sickening, and it's never quite sat right with me. The story about Kobe and Vanessa, it never quite sat right with me. So it's like you can be a great basketball player and a really shitty person, I guess. So I think that's always going to be a part of it. Obviously, in terms of points, 36,000 points. 36,928 points. Yikes, right? He ended up scoring more points in his career than Michael Jordan. Granted, a lot of that is longevity, but you know what? Credit to him. Probably the closest thing to LeBron James before LeBron James was Karl Malone. That's just, I don't even think that's cap. That's just fact. Speaking of Ewing and the benefit of playing in a really huge market, 11-time All-Star, 7-time All-NBA. Really, when you compare him to like some of the greatest centers in the NBA in NBA history, he doesn't make my top 5, and I don't even think it's close in terms of top 5 centers of all time. Barnes to Scotty isn't Carl's value of a replacement high due to playing with John Stockton. I think there's a sort of symbiotic relationship between the two where yeah, like I think there's a sort of symbiotic relationship between the two where you could say like who influenced who. But it's hard. It's hard to say that John Stockton is benefiting him or that he's benefiting him because it's like, like it works both ways is what I'm saying, right? Like, yeah. In terms of Hakeem's finals appearances, 1986. So he did make it with the Houston Rockets in 1986 against the Boston Celtics. Correct, you are. Hey, Oak Tree. Cool, man. SP, if Patrick Ewing declared for the 1984 draft, does Jordan still go third? No, not at all. Jordan would definitely have gone fourth, man. I mean, going third behind Hakeem and Bowie made a lot of sense back then. It's just how teams built their teams, right? Like you're talking about a league that was obsessed with centers, and Ewing was like the best center. I feel like Patrick Ewing might have gone with the hype that he had coming out of Georgetown. I feel like he might have gone over Hakeem. I don't know. Also, probably not enough people realize he's Jamaican. That's cool. Yeah. I feel like I've told that to like 3 or 4 people, and they're always a little bit surprised that Patrick Ewing is Jamaican. So yeah. Moving on to 1986. Jeff Hornacek, another huge part of those Utah Jazz teams, picked by Phoenix, ended up becoming a head coach. If I'm not mistaken, head coach. Yeah, Jeff Hornacek. Sounds right. Ron Harper, again, huge part of those Chicago Bulls teams. And then you have Arvydas Sabonis. Honestly, these two right here push it for me as being the greatest players in this draft. Now, that might be a little bit controversial given where they are, but man, Arvydas Sabonis, holy shit. Drazen Petrovic, also unfortunately a very short career, short-lived. He is widely, he's in the Hall of Fame, of course. He's a one-time All-NBA guy. He had a huge spike with New Jersey at the time. I remember because we were in New Jersey at the time, and got to watch him live, and it was just a really beautiful thing, right? I mean, he was putting up like 100 points over in Yugoslavia, and yeah, I mean, he was just incredible. But I tell you, the best player in this draft, 100%, is Arvydas Sabonis. I realize Dennis Rodman is a hell of a defender, hell of a rebounder, etc. But man, Arvydas Sabonis might have been, controversial take, probably the best center drafted in the 80s, man. I think he was better than Hakeem. I think he was better than David Robinson. I think he was better than all of them, man. I think like Shaq probably you could say is better. You can definitely say Bill Russell is better. You could say Tim Duncan, maybe close. But yikes. Like, Barnes and Scotty saying Sabonis was Joker before Joker, even bigger. Dude, he was like he was I don't want to say he's better than Jokic, right? But he did things that Nikola Jokic can't even dream of. Number one, he's bigger than Jokic, longer than Jokic, was way more athletic than Jokic, right? He was, okay, probably controversial. He might have been a better passer than Jokic too. He was definitely at the same age a better shooter than Jokic. That might be controversial. Jokic shoots like high 30s from three. Probably equivalent of shooters, man. This guy was honestly so freaking good. Defensively, especially. Defensively, offensively, both sides. He was incredible. How incredible was he? He was so incredible that even after all these injuries and the USSR and everything that kept him from coming to the league, he came over to Portland. He was still a top 5 center in the NBA during that time. Granted, his minutes were always low. He never cracked 30 minutes other than a 97, 98. But man, he was incredible. There's no planet in hell where I'm saying Jeff Hornacek was a better player than Arvydas Sabonis, right? Obviously, number one pick was Brad Daugherty. You know, he played 8 years. Solid career, man. Solid career. It's not like a bust. It wasn't like Michael Olowokandi or anything like that. But man, Nate McMillan, solid guard, you know, solid defender. Ron Harper again, but Jeff Hornacek, great shooter, everything, you know. 40% 3-point shooter. I remember playing with Jeff Hornacek, and was it Jeff Hornacek and John Stockton and NBA, you know, like those that 1996 video game. The most unfortunate nickname in all of pro sports, probably Jeff Hornacek, Horny. A very, very weird, yeah. No chance he was better than Jokic. I watched him in the 2000s. Yeah, you watched him without knees, man. You watched him after like injuries ravaged his career. You need to like actually dig up tape of him like murking Team USA. Honestly, man, the people who watched him play would swear up and down that he was better than Hakeem, better than anybody, better than Robinson, better than Hakeem, better than those guys. Again, Shaq probably better. I'd say Shaq was better. But to the people who put him in the Vlade Divac cast, I'm sorry, Vlade is from my country. It's not even close. No, not even close. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to the next draft. Therefore, saying value replacement is not everything. And I also do want to say that I think like value replacement, it's hard to say that Dennis Rodman doesn't deserve to be in the top 4 or top 3 in terms of impact. I think like the defensive analytics are missing some of his like impact. David Robinson, yes, huge. You know, it's shocking really to me that David Robinson and Reggie Miller pass Scottie Pippen in terms of value of replacement. I mean, Pippen played a ton, right? So Scottie Pippen, of course, you know, Bulls, Jerry Krause really liked him. He ends up going 5th to Seattle. They trade for him. They got the trade done. There's a ton of guys in this draft who made a huge impact in the league, including former Raptor Muggsy Bogues, including former Bull Horace Grant, Kevin Johnson, who ended up becoming a really huge player for the Phoenix Suns and then ended up becoming the mayor of Sacramento, if I'm not mistaken. Mark Jackson, of course, you know, very controversial figure, became a really huge coach, religious. I don't know why being religious is controversial, but certainly his remarks about certain communities have been very controversial. Reggie Miller, widely considered the greatest shooter of all time before Steph Curry came along and maybe Ray Allen came along. So really loaded draft here, the 1987 draft. This is the year I was born, so it was pretty cool, you know, to think about that. But yes, David Robinson, the number 1 overall pick. Very rarely is the number 1 overall pick actually the best player in the draft. I think David Robinson gets a little bit of a bad rep for the same reason that Clyde Drexler gets a bit of a bad rep, which is that when he finally emerged as the championship, he wasn't the main guy. And certainly the Twin Towers, a really huge talking point. I was a huge Spurs fan in the late 1990s. But yes, I mean, David Robinson had a hell of a career, man. He was a scoring champion, 93, 94. He was a block champion, 10-time All-NBA, All-Rookie. He was a defensive player of the year, rookie of the year. He won MVP in 94, 95. You know, 2-time NBA champion with the San Antonio Spurs under Greg Popovich. Of course, the main guy on that team was, of course, Tim Duncan from Wake Forest, and we'll definitely get to him at some point. But yeah, I think the only thing close to Robinson here that you could say is like, okay, we're in that conversation is Scottie Pippen. He had a ton of win shares on his career. I think he had a pretty good twilight. I feel like people don't give enough credit to his twilight in Portland. The first few years, because the points, were down a lot, like 99, 2000, he was averaging 12 points per game. People don't remember that. And honestly, I don't remember that. 12 points per game? Really? Do you realize Scottie Pippen was rated 94 in NBA 2K? The first one. The first NBA 2K, he was rated 94 for averaging 12 points per game, bro. That's pretty cool. Obviously usage down, roll down, whatever. But I think he was still a solid player. Obviously, the 2 years when Michael Jordan did retire, those would be like the high scoring years for Pip. And he was a solid player, man. He was like a do-it-all utility wing, right? He could defend the best player. Some people would probably correctly argue that he was a better defender than Michael Jordan. I don't know about that. I think it's close. It's close between the two. He's a little bit bigger. He was a tremendous player and pretty underrated passer as well. I'm not really sure who you would compare him to today. In the NBA, I guess some people have made mention of Sean Marion, Andre Karolinko. I don't think that's close, man. Some people have talked about Tracy McGrady. Ironically, Tracy McGrady was almost traded for Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen almost became a Raptor if that deal had gone through. So, little fun fact for you. Let's move on to the 1988 NBA draft. Wow, this video is going to go way too long. So, the first overall pick in this draft, Danny Manning, you remember him well. Not the strongest draft either. Rod Strickland, former Raptor. Rod Strickland. He had a cup of tea with the Toronto Raptors, 36.6 win shares. Honestly, it's really hard to say who was the best player in this draft. You could split hairs, right? It'd probably be between Rod Strickland, Mitch Richmond, and Dan Marley. Basically, a lot of guys who didn't win MVPs. But Rod Strickland had a hell of a career, and I'm inclined to say, let's give it to him, right? All-NBA, 1987-88, 97-98 All-NBA, which is shocking given how late in his career that came. Yeah, that's there you go. I mean, shoot, with the Washington Wizards, 10 and a half assists per game. I mean, he was fun to watch, man. Like Rod Strickland was really fun to watch. And definitely when I was coming up, he was one player that I watched a lot in terms of like trying to hone my own ball handling and skills development. Rod Strickland was great. But in terms of drafts so far, I think 88 might be one of the weakest we've looked at. In terms of the 99 NBA draft, the most win shares, of course, Vlade Divac, Cliff Robinson. Not the greatest draft either, right? If you're going to really, really nitpick at it. Tim Hardaway, crossover king, man. I remember Tim Hardaway with the Miami Heat. It's a really, really huge thing. But before the Heat, he was the original Run DMC, I believe, with the Golden State Warriors. That was an interesting team. You got Vlade Divac up there. He was an incredible passer, gifted passer, great feet. Good footwork, really fundamental center. He had a really long career with the Lakers before moving over to the Sacramento Kings. And I think he was just really incredible. He had the Charlotte Hornets a couple of years there, and then the Sacramento Kings. And I thought he was just great. He only made one All-Star team though. Kind of makes it puts into perspective just how deep and how great the team was. But that surprises me, honestly, that he only made one All-Star team. He should have made multiple All-Star teams. I wonder if part of this has to do with, politically speaking, like the NBA wanting to protect its image, him being from Yugoslavia, most of his prime was spent during the Yugoslavian wars. I think that might have to do with it. I feel like his career and his talent level probably warranted at least 3 All-Star teams. Just my opinion, but yes. But yeah, in terms of the best player in this draft, I'm inclined to say you could like in terms of impact, man, Glenn Rice was sick. Like he was incredible. Like he had some really, really incredible years. Of course, like with the New York Knicks, I remember him early, late in the New York Knicks, but definitely he really had his like time with the Charlotte Hornets, right? He was 3-time All-Star with the Charlotte Hornets, and everyone had his jersey, man. Like everyone had his jersey. If you were around 95, 97, whatever, everyone had a Glenn Rice jersey. Charlotte Hornets was the sickest jersey. And I think like just in terms of like impact on the game, like I feel like he really became a household name because of how he shot the basketball for that time. I think he was a really great player, man. Um, Cliff Robinson, deserves a lot of credit, Uncle Cliff, for just like in terms of like the longevity of it. But I'm inclined to say Tim Hardaway probably gets it. He had a huge, huge impact as well. The crossover, team success, personal success, all-star games, etc. So 5-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA, All Rookie plus Hall of Fame. Like, I mean, he had a solid career. Certainly not Magic Johnson. It's not Scottie Pippen. It's not, Larry Bird. But hey, not every draft is like that. And frankly, for a while, drafts weren't great. They just weren't that great. You were seeing like some really great players come through. This one, Derek Coleman goes first overall. I do remember Derek Coleman. He played a pretty long career, played 15 years in the NBA. I think in this one, it's going to be Gary Payton, right? It's got to be Gary Payton. And the next after that is Tony Kukoc. No, it's a distant second, man. Gary Payton, probably one of my 10 favorite players of all time. The glove from Oregon State. He goes second overall. He was a big guard, clamp you up, great defender, made it to the finals, just incredible, right? He had a really, really interesting career, tons of steals, right? Tons of steals, just a great defender. It's like the steals champion in 95, 96, 9-time All-NBA, 2006 NBA champion. He ended up winning it with the Miami Heat, ironically. 9-time All-Star, 9-time All-Defense, 75th anniversary team, All-Rookie, plus one of the very few guards in NBA history to win Defensive Player of the Year. So really awesome career, and I really enjoyed watching him with the Seattle Supersonics, man. Mohamed Abdul-Rauf was the third pick in the draft, and honestly, one of my favorite players of all time. People do not remember him. He currently, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, still plays in the Big Three League, right? Some of you may remember him as Chris Jackson, but later known as Mohamed Abdul-Rauf. And, I think there was a lot of controversy over him, the anthem, his faith, Islam, etc., where the NBA was politically and the political climate at the time. Obviously, the NBA, an organization which is marred with a history of tons of racism and Islamophobia, etc. I think Mohamed Abdul-Rauf was just an incredible player, man. Just a really joy to watch play basketball. Pure hooper, purest jump shot. I think I used to watch his tape. And try to pattern my jump shot after him. He's just an incredible player. He was the third overall pick, certainly nowhere close to the value of replacement levels. But yeah, he was, despite playing fewer seasons than most of these guys, he only played 9 seasons. Yeah, I feel like that really cut him short, man. Any other names really worth mentioning here? Tony Kukoc, he was also an incredible player. He unfortunately ended up playing like a few years with a really terrible Chicago Bulls team after, Jordan retired and Pippen moved on to the Portland Trailblazers. But yeah, nevertheless, a very interesting career. Croatian forward, had a huge, huge run with the national team. He was a part of the original Yugoslavian teams. So he was great. Really great player. Moving on to the 1991 NBA draft. Man, this video is legit going to be 2 hours. I better speed it up. Dikembe Mutombo, big time Atlanta Hawks legend. Dikembe Mutombo out of Georgetown at the time. I believe David Thompson just producing like centers after centers, and this was one of them. Incredible player. Terrell Brandon, also I remember Terrell Brandon with the Minnesota Timberwolves. But yeah, he was also a speedy guard. Larry Johnson, of course, New York Knicks legend, Larry Johnson. LJ, also a huge, huge Charlotte Hornets guy. Probably had like his best years with the Charlotte Hornets, of course, and moves on to the Knicks like many stars did at the time. Multiple time All-Star. He was the first overall pick in this draft. But yeah, the cake definitely goes to Mount Mutombo, man. No. Plus, he anchored the defense that ended up stealing Game 1 from Kobe and Shaq through their dynastic run. Paired up with Allen Iverson, of course, well past his prime at the time. But man, this guy racked up those blocks and assists. He was an 8-time All-Star, despite the fact that he wasn't really a huge scoring guy. He was eventually traded for Theo Ratliff, which ended his Atlanta Hawks career, Ratliff, of course, from the Philadelphia 76ers. They had Matt Geiger, Theo Ratliff. They traded Theo Ratliff for Dikembe Mutombo. They basically aged up their core in order to get the defensive anchor around Allen Iverson that could really like bolster him. And he was great. Of course, he was no Shaq, and like many centers at the time, he struggled to guard Shaquille O'Neal. But yeah, he had a great career, man. At his peak, he averaged 4.5 blocks per game. Per game. That's insanity, man. Granted, blocks, like guys who average 4 blocks per game were just way more common back then because I think like teams took fewer threes. Obviously, now you take more threes and it's much, much easier to see like why you don't really see guys averaging 4 blocks. But let me tell you someone who is going to average 4 blocks at some point in his career, Victor Wembanyama. That is definitely going to freaking happen, man. I watched him tonight, just swatting everything, watching him against OKC. It was really incredible to watch, man. Like the San Antonio Spurs beat the Minnesota Timberwolves, the number 1 ranked, Minnesota Timberwolves in the West. That was a really impressive win. Big gut check for that team. Shaquille O'Neal. If you're surprised that his value of replacement is so low relative to his standing, it is because Shaq, like many centers who did not take care of his body, just like Chuck, power forward, who he does, NBA, TNT, that stuff with. I feel like Shaquille O'Neal really, really like dropped off, man. Clearly the best player in this draft, bar none, 100%. There's nothing even close to it. Alonzo Mourning was a hell of a center. Ends up winning a championship together with the Miami Heat as well later in their career. Robert Horry, of course, 7 championships with 3 different teams. He won 3 with Houston. No, wait, 2 with Houston, 2 with San Antonio, 3 with the Lakers. Some people say right place, right time. I say Robert Horry was just that guy, man. He was huge. He was just a winning player. Every team should wish they could get a Robert Horry. Latrell Sprewell, unfortunately, most famous for choking out his coach, PJ Carlissimo. But honestly, as a kid growing up in New York, that number 8 that OG Anunoby now wears, that was always Latrell Sprewell. And it's hard for me to look at OG Anunoby wearing number 8 right now, man. I gotta be honest. I had a number 8 Latrell Sprewell jersey growing up. So anyways, Shaq, I mean, let me just take you through Shaq's career for a second. 15-time All-Star, a lot of times voted in. Got really pissed off when he started getting those center votes in the West. 2-time scoring champion, 14-time All-NBA, Rookie of the Year, 3-time All-Star MVP, 1999-2000 MVP, 3-time Finals MVP. That first three-peat with the Lakers, he won Finals MVP in every single one of them. 4-time NBA champion, 3-time with the Lakers, of course, with Kobe, and then 1 time with D Wade, and then he kept trying to get that 5th one. Just to give you a sense of how his value of a replacement dropped throughout the years, let me just show you. So this is the first player where I really, really just want to show you how much it dropped off. Okay, so there's the peak right there, right? 1999, 2000. That is the best of Shaq. That is the best he's ever been. And then it was just a fall off. So the fall off was as follows. At age 27, he was a 9.0. 28, 7.1, 29, 6.1, 30, 5.5. That is exactly where it pretty much ended. That is his peak right there. So probably from the age of 21, going all the way to the age of 31, 30, you could say was his peak, right? Barnes and Scotty saying Shaq's VORP dropped due to empty calorie seasons. No, man, it dropped due to bad conditioning, due to the fact that his defense fell off a cliff later on in his career. He posted defensive negative boxes minus on defense. That should never, ever, ever have happened. But yeah, it just gives you an idea. Like value replacement is a great gauge of like career value. Like how much value did you give, right? So obviously you're going to have guys who frankly like had huge peaks, but they didn't sustain it. I think LeBron is just putting into perspective. And I think when we get to the 2003 draft, if we ever get to the 2003 draft at this pace, I think we'll have a greater appreciation for just how amazing LeBron's career has been. Okay. Wouldn't be surprised if Chris Webber does lead this draft class. A pretty weak draft class, if I'm being honest. Chris Webber, Unfortunately, to this day, despite everything good that he did in the NBA, which includes 5 All-NBA, 5-time All-Star, rebounding champion, All-Rookie, Rookie of the Year, he makes it to the Hall of Fame. I think most people will probably still remember him calling a timeout, Michigan. Like, it's sad. Probably the controversy, the court case, all of that stuff. Is there anyone even close that deserves mention in this draft? Honestly, Sam Cassell winning a championship. Winning a championship was huge. Nick Van Exel, cultural, in terms of that. Penny Hardaway, peak Penny Hardaway, damn. Peak Penny Hardaway prior to the injuries probably makes a case against Weber. Unfortunately, therein lies the point. Like, what's your peak? Can you sustain it, etc.? So let's move on to the next draft. I am pretty sure I just heard my dog drop his bowl. My dog is not doing too well right now. All right. Okay, moving on. Jason Kidd, no contest. But Grant Hill, he was on track. And, Eddie Jones, a hell of a player, man. Eddie Jones was so good. Donyell Marshall often does not get talked about, man. Jalen Rose all the way at 9th is kind of shocking. The fact that Jalen Rose, because of Michigan, all the fame, making it to the finals, having a really dominant run with the Pacers as a big point guard in the finals, I don't think most people would have guessed that Charlie Ward and Aaron McKee and Wesley Person had a higher value of replacement than Jalen Rose. Just given the fact that Jalen Rose is a media personality now, that's shocking to me. In terms of cultural impact, my favorite player in this draft for sure, Brian Grant. That's probably my favorite player in this draft. But clearly the best player in this draft was Jason Kidd. Ended up, taking the Nets to the finals a couple of years. Then he, of course, ended up winning a championship with Dirk Nowitzki. Grant Hill, definitely could have been, probably would have been the best player. Those Detroit years early with Grant Hill before he showed up in Orlando were the stuff of legends, man. Momo saying Eddie Jones was a favorite player in the 90s. Damn, you must hate Kobe now, eh? Eddie Jones was awesome, man. He was one of my favorite players as well. Eddie Jones, Michael Finley. It was the Jordan brand, the 6'6" guys. It's funny. Eddie Jones was incredible. Like, he really was. You look at his career, it really was something. Donyell Marshall, former Raptor, just so great. Like, when you look at his impact, ironically, Donyell Marshall and Jalen Rose in this draft, the 4th overall pick, Donyell Marshall out of UConn, and the 13th overall pick to Denver, which was Jalen Rose. Both those guys were traded together to the Raptors for Jerome Williams and Antonio Davis from the Chicago Bulls. I remember that day very clearly. Donyell Marshall is incredible. I feel like he was a very understated guy. I think he was very much above his time. But he was the type of guy who could put 8 threes on the board, right? He could also give you 2 blocks and 2 steals and 12 rebounds. He's a crazy valuable player, man. He didn't generate a lot of his own shots. There was a lot of catch and shoot stuff. He didn't really have an in-between game and all that. But, man, in terms of elite role players, him with the Jazz was incredible. And then him with the Bulls and then him with the Raptors, I think he just had a really underrated career, if you're asking me. In terms of guys that just often do not get mentioned, he's definitely up there for me. Really incredible. Very sad story about what's happening with him now, but just an incredible player. Let's move on. And Glenn Big Dog Robinson, of course, had some very, very dominant runs with those Bucks teams. Here we go, 1995. Who am I guessing? I'm going to guess it's going to be Kevin Garnett, right? Yeah. And Rasheed Wallace a distant second. Now, this is where I fall apart because Rasheed Wallace was definitely my preferred player between the two, but no one can understate KG's greatness. Obviously, his career speaks for itself. One of the first, guys come out of high school. One of the first, obviously not the first. Moses Malone, I believe, was the first, but he was incredible, man. 15-time All-Star. He won the championship with the Big Three. Rebounding champion, 9-time All-NBA, 12-time All-Defense. He won the 2003-2004 MVP. I believe there was an NBA 2K where he was 99 overall. I remember that too, for sure. All rookie, Defensive Player of the Year, 2007, 2008. He was incredible. The big ticket. And Jerry Stackhouse, one of my least favorite players of all time. And he was up there too. Michael Finley was incredible. He had a huge, he was like really big with those Mavericks teams. He, Steve Nash, Dirk Nowitzki, Sean Bradley in the middle. Yeah, it was interesting. And there you go, Damon Stoudemire, who cut his teeth with the Toronto Raptors, and of course went to Portland, became more of a role player, played 13 years. That's a hell of an accomplishment for a guy who's 5'10", man. Hell of an accomplishment. And then the aforementioned Theo Ratliff, there's some decent value in this draft, man. Moving on. Rasheed Wallace, I think, is just like super talented, man. Super talented. Really underrated career. Unfortunately, very much overshadowed by all of the antics. Now, interesting. Here comes the draft that everyone calls the greatest draft. And again, it's interesting because the top guy in this draft is no surprise to anyone, is Kobe Bryant. But I think the second guy in this draft should be a surprise to most people, because you would assume, based on the personal highs that Allen Iverson and Steve Nash had. Allen Iverson as the face of the league for a little while, much to the disappointment of David Stern. And of course, Steve Nash with his multiple MVPs and this very late bloom that he had with the Phoenix Suns and the analytics and stuff. Even Peja Stojakovic, finishing top 4 in MVP voting one year with the Sacramento Kings. Jermaine O'Neal, right, made a few All-NBA teams. I feel like this is a very, very deep draft. If you have 11th Jermaine O'Neal, like, you have done very well. Zydrunas Ilgauskas being 12th, Derek Fisher 13th, JYD number 14. That's shout outs to JYD. But man, this draft was deep. But I feel like Ray Allen gets underrated. Is that fair? Is that fair? I think he gets underrated a lot, man. Like, if you told the average fan that Ray Allen had an analytically more superior, like a superior career to Allen Iverson or Steve Nash, I think they would not believe you. But that is what longevity and sustaining, like, your greatness does for you. Consider his sustenance. So let's take a look at his value of a replacement as it pertains to the consistency. My God. Okay. Just look at it. Like, look at how well he sustained himself. Even at the age of 35, he was giving a 3.6 value of a replacement. And of course, that's a far cry from where he was in Seattle, definitely where he was in Milwaukee, but it's not that far, right? He had like 3 incredible runs in his career. He had Milwaukee. They were successful. It was a good team. They had some deep runs in the playoffs. He had Seattle. He was incredible there. He didn't have as much team success, but he was incredible with Rashard Lewis. And then he had that late season run with Boston. And then, hey, he had another one. He had a twilight, an incredible twilight. He was always positive, man. Really one of the most underrated, if not the most underrated career probably in NBA history, man. Just kudos to the end of the world for Ray Allen, man. Honestly, just one of those guys where it's like, not an ego thing, right? Happily came off the bench for the Miami Heat, provided such a spark. He's been a great mentor to a lot of players. I mean, he's just a really incredible player. No surprises here. Tim Duncan, 91.1 value of a replacement. Tracy McGrady, a very distant second. Probably surprises nobody. Unfortunately, Tracy McGrady, coming out of high school, I think his body took a little bit too much in Orlando, and then by the time he was in Houston, a couple of years, kind of cooked. Obviously, the fact that he didn't get out of the first round, that whole thing about him, I think that really did taint his career a lot. Tim Duncan, Hall of Fame, 50-time All-Star, 5-time NBA champion, Rookie of the Year, MVP, All-Star MVP, 2-time MVP, he just such a sustained greatness. Tim Duncan, everything I said about Ray Allen, same thing applies to Tim Duncan. Just take a look at where his value of replacement stayed, in terms of just like throughout his career. Like, look at that peak. He sustained from 21 all the way, you could argue, till 38. At 38 years old, he was 4 value of a replacement, dude. Pascal Siakam, no offense to him, will never touch 4 value of a replacement. That's how great this guy was. He was an all-star at 38. Shit, man. That's crazy. Well, I don't think Pascal touches 4 value replacement. Has he? Maybe he's touched it. He hasn't exceeded it by much, though. Like it's hard to get a 6 value replacement season, man. It's pretty hard. Okay, moving on. Was there a close second? I don't think so. But Tracy McGrady, like he had some incredible highs. You want to take a look at his highs? Chauncey Billups, of course, former Raptor, former Celtic, etc. But of course, NBA champion with the Detroit Pistons. He was great. But if you take a look at Tracy McGrady in a vacuum and just look at his like individual performance with look at that Orlando Magic season, man. That 1 year right there. That's insanity, man. 10.5 boxes minus. Very few players in NBA history have ever touched 10. Very few. So his peak was unfortunately very short-lived because by the time he was 30, it was completely over. Like it was done. So he had basically 18, 19. Yeah, in the NBA, he was kind of coming off the bench for the Raptors. Then he was starting. I believe he started a bunch of games, didn't he? I believe he did. Yeah. I mean, by year 3, he was like a halfway starter, right? And then, of course, he goes to Orlando and just takes off, right? Becomes an all-star and all that shit. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the 1998 NBA draft. And now you're about to get a whole bunch of really weak drafts all at once, right? I mean, yeah, you had Vince Carter. This is the last like solid draft for a while. You had Dirk Nowitzki at the very, very top, Paul Pierce, Vince Carter. Again, Vince Carter, 22 years. 22 years to get 58 value replacement kind of puts into consideration those guys with 90, 100, etc. Like how great they must have been to be able to do it in less years. But like 22 years and Dirk Nowitzki playing 21 years, this was a longevity draft, and this is craziness, right? Even Paul Pierce playing 19 is incredible. Fun fact, Vince did lead the league in value replacement 1 year, which if you buy the hype that value replacement is the MVP stat, then you can make a case that he should have won MVP that year. That being said, unfortunately, you don't win MVP the year you're supposed to win it. You usually win it the year after you're supposed to win it. And unfortunately for Vince, the year he led the league in value replacement, the very next year he kind of fell off. But anyways, Dirk Nowitzki, MVP, two trips to the finals, I believe. One trip, kind of a humiliation, choke job, etc. But then he redeems himself. The whole arc redeems itself in 2011, wins an NBA championship, and then just sort of drifts, professional effort. 14-time All-Star, probably the best shooting big of all time. I don't think that's overly debatable, but of course, but yeah, moving on. 1999. Not a lot to talk about here. You can make a case. Sean Marion, Manu Ginobili. Okay, shit. There is a lot to talk about. My bad. Okay, Andre Kirilenko, the VORP king. He was incredible. I feel like he doesn't get enough credit because I think he was way above his time, right? Sean Marion, again, same type of player, really funky jump shot. I feel like those two guys just don't get enough love, but you know who I definitely think doesn't get enough love and definitely is the best player in this draft? Manu Ginobili. Definitely, in my opinion, the second best player on some of those Spurs teams, but unfortunately he goes to Yeah, I mean, I think I remember Kobe being on record saying he was the best shooting guard, not named him in the NBA draft. Yeah, I think he was the best, man. But again, not a career full of accolades. He won championships, right? He was a 4-time NBA champion. He showed up. He didn't get the 5 that Duncan got because he won that first one before he came over, but he was 6th man of the year, 2-time All-NBA, All-Rookie. He was a little bit older when he came over, 2-time All-Star. Again, 2-time All-Star. That's criminally insane. He should have been like an 8-time All-Star, 10-time All-Star. He was incredible. Anyone else worth mentioning in this draft? Of course, Sean Marion, again, The Matrix human highlight film, also a former Raptor. Some people forget about that. Elton Brand was the guy who went first overall in this draft. Andre Miller, Baron Davis, my God. This is a damn deep draft. You got all the way to Stevie Franchise, Steve Francis. You still got All-Stars. Steve Francis definitely made some All-Star teams. He made 3 All-Star teams. Again, migraines, a lot of stuff, got in the way. Infamously, people say till this day, there's somebody in Vancouver who still walks around cursing Steve Francis's name. Probably, arguably, would have saved the franchise had they gotten him. He was a highlight film, but I think Baron Davis was a better point guard. Probably Baron Davis was a better point guard than Andre Miller as well. I think B. Diddy he did it all, man. He was a really great point guard. I loved watching him in Charlotte, and I really loved watching him with the We Believe Warriors. Later in his career, Jason Terry, of course, won a championship with the aforementioned Dirk Nowitzki. Just a really great draft. Here comes the weak draft. Here we go. Okay, 2000, 2001. These are definitely some weak drafts. There you go. Michael Redd, a second round pick, picked 43rd overall, is a top VORP leader in this draft. Then you go to Mike Miller and Hedo Turkoglu, another former Raptor, Hedo Turkoglu, and then consummate sixth man of the year, Jamal Crawford, who rounds out that group, and Kenyon Martin, I guess you could say, Raptor, former Raptor legend, Mo Pete, Eddie House, sharpshooter. I mean, I don't think there was a single Hall of Famer in this draft. Am I mistaken? Michael Redd didn't make the Hall of Fame, right? He did make an All-Star team, but he did not make the Hall of Fame. Stromile Swift, Darius Miles, Marcus Fizer, holy shit, DeMar Johnson. I mean, damn, Joel Przybyla, Etan Thomas, Mateen Cleaves. I remember Mateen Cleaves very well from Michigan State. I believe he was teammates with Mo Pete. So, nevertheless, moving on, 2001. This is the Kwame Brown draft, and Tyson Chandler. Clearly, the best player in this draft was picked third overall, Pau Gasol, and soon after Tony Parker. People often remember Tony Parker as being a little bit better than he really was, in my opinion. Really, really solid, paint guard. I think to call him like one of the 5-10 greatest point guards of all time is a little bit crazy, but he was definitely great. For all the hoopla and all the money and all the hibachi and all the hype and all the podcasts that Gilbert Arenas gets, you would not believe that he was seventh in this draft in value replacement. You see the way he talks, you'd probably think he was first. Shane Battier, great defender. Really, really great defender. And honestly, one of the best all-time best conversations that I think I've ever listened to about basketball was Shane Battier on the Knuckleheads podcast. Definitely go watch it. He talks about guarding Kobe, the meticulous preparation that it required. Really reminded me a little bit of OG Anunoby before OG Anunoby, right? Like maybe a bit of a more limited player, played with Hubie Brown, came out when he was a little bit older, top 6 pick. They expect something of him. He's a 3-4 type of combo forward, but he was incredible. Unlike other combo forwards like Marcus Fizer, he really did find a niche in the NBA, and I think he was great. Tyson Chandler was one of my favorite centers, obviously huge blocks guy, but became an NBA champion. He was a fantastic player. Yeah. And in terms of just career accolades, just to be consistent, Pau Gasol was a Hall of Famer, 6-time All-Star, huge career with the Spanish national team, 2-time All-NBA, 4-time All-NBA, 2-time NBA champion. Of course, he was the running mate, the second option that went up against, first went up against Kevin Garnett, not easy, and then went up against Dwight Howard for that second championship. So really interesting. Moving on. And of course, this was a Zebo draft. Okay, moving on to 2001. We already did 2001, 2002. Okay, 2002. My God, we got 20 years to go. Holy shit. This is going to be a 2.5 hour live. I did not expect this. Value replacement. Holy shit. Carlos Boozer, most famously known for spray painting his own hair, unfortunately. Also, I mean, this guy's just known for all the wrong things, right? Don't worry. Soon enough, he'll be known for all the right things. He had 80 win shares on his career. He did make a couple all-star teams. Huge controversy, not re-signing with Cleveland. Little wink deal. Also being a big proponent for... it's crazy. I think the best player in this draft is definitely Yao Ming. I think you'd say Yao Ming because he racked up this in 8 years before injuries just kind of ravaged his career. Who's the second best player in this draft? I'm inclined to say Amara Stoudemire. Am I just hating on Carlos Boozer, dude? I don't know. Who else could you give it to? No, I think it's Yao. And then after that, it might be Tayshaun Prince, man. I think like Tayshaun is a little bit underrated. A lot of Detroit, Detroit, I feel like they don't give him enough credit for what he was doing. I remember him guarding Tracy McGrady, man. They don't get out of that. They don't get out of that series without him. So I am inclined to say it's definitely Yao, but closely followed by probably not Carlos Boozer. But here we go. Here's LeBron James, value of replacement. Does that shock anybody? Nearly 150 value of replacement across 21 years. It's like, this is some serious, like crazy shit. I mean, he has more than lapped Dwayne Wade. He has more than 4-timed Carmelo Anthony, and he is nearly on the verge of 5-timing Chris Bosh, who unfortunately had to retire a little bit earlier because of blood clots. But man, like, respect the man. Like, give him his flowers. Stop talking shit about him. I mean, 19-time All-Star, about to be 20-time All-Star, scoring champion, 4-time NBA champion. Yeah, he lost 6 finals. Okay, he got to the finals 10 times. Shut the hell up. 4-time MVP, 6-time All Defense, 4 times Finals MVP, Rookie of the Year. I mean, jeez, you can't even. There is no second, man. There's like, he is the second best player of all time, and I think there's like some very legitimate cases to be made for first of all time, but I'm not going there. I just can't. Moving on to the 2004 draft, Andre Iguodala. Guess who the Raptors failed to pick at the 8th overall pick? And guess where that guy is? I'm going to find Rafael Rougeau and tell you where he is. He's 44th. The guy at 8th who is negative 2.1 value of replacement. Literally, there's no one worse than former Raptor Sebastian Telfair. Shit. Oh my God. How many former Raptors can I find here? Popso. There we go. There's another former Raptor. Did we ever sign Robert Swift? I feel like we did. Did we? Pavel Podkolzin, the guy we almost wanted to draft. Chris Humphreys is there at 23rd. Let's see. Former Raptors. That pretty much does it. Interesting. Josh Smith, often known as the guy that Detroit signed who couldn't shoot. I think he was pretty solid, man. But really shocking that Andre Iguodala ended up like putting up more value replacement over his career than Dwight Howard. I think it would be pretty criminally insane to say Dwight Howard is not the best player in the draft. No offense to Andre Iguodala, but I think Dwight takes it, man. I got to be honest. Like, I don't like Dwight at all as a player, but nah, I can't. I can't. But Andre Iguodala was a hell of a player, man. Hell of a player. Got a Finals MVP with the Golden State Warriors. Just a really, really solid thing. Chris Paul. Can we say the debate between Chris Paul and Darren Williams is over now? No? Yes? Okay. That was a real thing at a time, And speaking of guys that the Raptors passed up on, Danny Granger, a name that should probably haunt people. I remember talking to Jack Armstrong about this a long, long time ago. And I remember saying to him in 2006, 2005, I remember saying like, oh man, give Joey Graham some time. He'll be great. One of my all-time favorite fails in the draft. I really believed in Joey Graham for a while there. Danny Granger was definitely the right pick. All injuries aside. David Lee, little known fact. He was a former All-Star. He was a former All-Star. He's a 2-time All-Star. New York Knicks legend. He was also All-NBA. He was All-NBA, bro. That's crazy to me. Charlie Villanueva, probably definitely 100% the wrong pick, but I really like Charlie V. Darren Williams, despite, retiring very soon and falling off a cliff in Brooklyn, he'll unfortunately see sometimes the guys' careers are known for the wrong things. He will always be the guy who ended Jerry Sloan's career with the Utah Jazz, unfortunately. And Chris Paul, maybe he'll always be known as a playoff choker, but honestly, I consider him one of the top 5 point guards of all time. Defensive impact, longevity. Honestly, it's the same thing as Ray Allen and, ironically, another Wake Forest alum, Tim Duncan, right? Which is longevity, professionalism, taking care of your body, being sustainably great. You know what I mean? Hey, Sean, what's going on, bro? Was it the most? Yeah, I thought Charlie V was going to be pretty good too, man. I remember watching Charlie V in high school in New Jersey with Luol Deng. And I thought, like, man, we got a great one here. He was great. We still traded him for TJ Ford the next year, though. Kyle Lowry. Hey, Groat. I didn't know this, actually. I'm finding this out with you. Kyle Lowry is the value replacement leader, despite being the 24th pick. Yo, this is the Andrea Bargnani draft. Where is Andrea Bargnani in value replacement? Oh God, he's 17th with 1.5. So just so we are clear, that means LeBron James has had 100 times more impact than Andrea Bargnani. Wow, 150 value replacement. That's crazy. And ironically, Andrea Bargnani didn't even manage to usurp the guy he was traded for, Steve Novak. Isn't that hilarious? JJ Redick, underrated career. Brandon Roy, oh, what could have been? What could have been? He definitely would have been number one in that draft, man. Definitely. But Rudy Gay, former Raptor Rudy Gay, surprised he's that high, man. Paul Millsap, hell of a player. LaMarcus Aldridge, yeah, not my favorite player, but honestly had a really, really high. But Kyle Lowry, 6-time All-Star, NBA champion, made an All-NBA team. I think this guy was solid. I think he was a bit underrated, to be honest. But yeah, like people like clown on him being the GOAT or whatever. But hey, man, like you realize the names I've said leading their draft classes. He's one of them. So yeah, let me know if you knew that. Like I didn't know that. I wouldn't have guessed that. I would have guessed that LaMarcus Aldridge had more than him just because of numbers. But yeah, definitely one of the weaker drafts, though. In fairness, 2006 was a bit weak. You know, a draft that was not weak? This one, Kevin Durant, 83 value replacement. Certainly, incredible. Mike Conley, one of my all-time faves. Former Raptor legend, Marcus Gasol, 37 value replacement on his career. And current Raptor legend, Thaddeus Young, with 20.6. Give it some credit, it's crazy to play basketball at a high level for this long. But Kevin Durant, 4-time scoring champion, 10-time All-NBA, Rookie of the Year, MVP, All-Star MVP, 2-time All-Star MVP, 2 times Finals MVP, both times with the Golden State Warriors. Again, Jeff Green's still kicking around. He has 16 years, 4.4 value replacement. How has he stuck around so long? Any guys that are worth talking about? Joakim Noah, one of my really all-time favorite players. Really loved him in Chicago. Just enjoyable to watch. Really fun guy. Okay. Russell Westbrook. Holy shit, man. Despite winning MVPs, he's got a 57.9 value replacement. So basically, great career. Hard to argue he's not the best player in this draft. He is. 9-time All-Star, 2-time scoring champ, 9-time All-NBA, MVP 2016, 2017, 3-time assist champ, 2-time All-Star MVP. He was solid, man. Solid. And no one saw this coming, when he was drafted. Look at the guys who drafted ahead of him. Obviously, Derrick Rose, probably my favorite player in this draft, but alas, what could have been, right? The injuries just really did him in. 2009. If you don't mind, I'm just going to buzz through these, man, because I think we know a lot more about these players than we did about the previous players. But James Harden, 10-time All-Star, 3-time scoring champ, 7-time All-NBA, 6th man of the year in 2011, 2012 with the OKC Thunder, went to the finals with that team. 17, 18 MVP, all rookie team, 75th anniversary team, really still one of the best players in the NBA, which is also a testament to his greatness. And really, when it comes to this draft, the only guy close to him is Steph Curry, and he's definitely the best player in this draft. Now, why is Steph Curry behind James Harden? Honestly, one could say Steph had a shakier start to his career, and it wasn't always so great. So I think definitely you're giving Steph Curry the wins here. In terms of win shares, James Harden's beating them. In terms of box plus minus, James Harden's beating them. In terms of value replacement, James Harden's beating them. But in terms of championships, Steph Curry's got him beat. 9-time All-Star, 2-time scoring champion, 4-time NBA champion, 2-time MVP, All-Star MVP, Finals MVP, Western Conference Finals MVP. Like, he's got a lot, man. 9-time All-NBA. He was the steals champion, 15-16 steals champion. That's kind of crazy. You say Curry easily. I think, like, James Harden gets a bad rep, personally. I mean, DeMar DeRozan's up here as well. Surprising probably for some people that Blake Griffin and Drew Holiday, despite, playing fewer games than DeMar DeRozan, have had a greater impact on winning. Should surprise absolutely no one who's actually understood the game of basketball. But yeah, Danny Green right there. 2 players traded right for each other. Isn't that funny? Danny Green and DeMar DeRozan right next to each other. But the perception, you know what I mean? The perception of LeBron, people really underrate Danny Green, man. In terms of like analytics versus actual perception of who a player is. When the Raptors traded Jakob Poeltl and DeMar DeRozan for Kawhi Leonard, the perception was it was Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green tossed in. Really, when you consider like the actual year that the two had, that year, you could say they had almost identical impact, just a completely different way of creating impact on the basketball court. So yeah, this was a great draft. Great draft. It doesn't get talked about enough though. 2009 draft was absolutely incredible. 2010, yeah, man, Paul George, definitely Paul George. By far, Paul George. There's nothing close to it. John Wall, you could say injuries don't catch up to him, but Paul George just had a really great career, had a really high peak with OKC. But yeah, steals champion, 8-time All-Star, 6-time All-NBA, 4-time All-Defense. Just a really, really great development story, if I'm being honest. Moving on to players that probably people know a hell of a lot more about than the players I've been talking about for the last hour. In terms of value replacement, yeah, it's going to be Kawhi Leonard, bro. Another former Raptor leading the top, 46.6 with no chances of slowing down. It's basically a two-way race between him and Jimmy Butler and, well, I guess Kyrie Irving, but I doubt Kyrie catches up unless either of those guys go off, like just fall off a cliff. But it's really like a three-way toss-up between those three, and I don't think it's even close. I think it's Kawhi Leonard, man. Just like his accolades, 2 times Finals MVP alone should win it. But yeah, he's a 2-time, champion. Won Finals MVP both times. The first one with the San Antonio Spurs, second one, of course, with the Raptors. He's an All-Star MVP, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 7-time All-Defensive, and he's still playing like a top 10 player right now. He's incredible. Of course, Kyrie Irving was is a hell of a player. He's still playing at a very, very high level as well. So you're starting to see players now whose careers are still technically being defined. So we won't pay too much attention to the career accolades. Let's just go through who the best player is in that draft so far. So this one, it's Dame versus Anthony Davis. And I think Draymond Green deserves some credit here too for being such an instrumental part. Obviously, I'm going to give the edge to Anthony Davis here. I like Dame more. Clearly, I like Dame a hell of a lot more. Anthony Davis has the hardware. He has a championship. But I'm going to give it to Anthony Davis, man. The defensive impact of that dude is enormous. Dame has probably impacted your heart more. He's probably impacted the highlights more, but Anthony Davis is definitely the best player in that draft. Giannis Antetokounmpo, what could have been, hey, 5th, Otto Porter, one of my favorite players as well. But hey, there's Dennis Schroeder with 3.2 value of replacement right there at number 15 behind Mike Muscala and Cody Zeller and Tim Hardaway and KCP and Georgiou Dieng and Nerlens Noel and Victor Oladipo and Kelly Olynyk and Steven Adams and Otto Porter. And Mason Plumlee. Yo, I just need Dennis Schroeder to hear me when I say this. You is not him. You're not him. Okay. 3.2 value of replacement. This guy talks like he's fucking 20, 30, 40 value of replacement. Anyway, Giannis, his career is still being written. I feel he will probably retire with like a 75 to 80 value of replacement. Crip. At the end of the day, Dennis made the list. Yes, he is 15th in a weak draft class. Congratulations. Is one of the weakest draft classes, by the way. 2014. Okay, 2013. Moving on. 2014. Nikola Jokic. He's probably going to retire with a value replacement of probably over 100 on the pace that he's going. But here's a fun fact: Nikola Jokic in his career has a value replacement which is almost literally twice Joel Embiid. Isn't that funny? So you listen to people talk about these two, you're like, 1A, 1B. It's really not even fucking close, man. Okay, moving on. Okay. Karl-Anthony Towns and Kristaps Porzingis and Devin Booker. I mean, honestly, who do you put first in this draft, right? You could say Devin Booker, definitely in terms of just like where his career is. You could say Kristaps Porzingis from like the perspective of he's done it in less time. But I think Cat gets slept on, bro. Like he is the greatest shooting big in the NBA. He's on a winning team right now. Crip saying this TBD. Yeah, I think this might be one of those TBDs. It kind of depends on whether Karl-Anthony Towns and the Minnesota Timberwolves win some championships and don't lose to the San Antonio Spurs. This one, Domantas Sabonis, he is edging out Pascal Siakam. I feel like his career is probably on a better trajectory and probably, a long time ago, probably 4 years ago, it was so unfathomable that anyone would take over Ben Simmons. But alas, that's the career he's had. This was a pretty deep draft. Jaylen Brown, for all the friggin', hoopla about how great a player he is, man, analytics do not like Jaylen Brown. Just a hair above Jakob Poeltl at 9th. Jamal Murray, again, a guy who does most of his damage in the playoffs, one of the greatest playoff risers. Malcolm Brogdon, just great player, man. And DeJounte Murray, one of my favorite players as well. These guys are all mostly in their late 20s right now, so TBD for sure. I wouldn't be overly surprised to see Pascal Siakam like start to rise up and maybe finish his career out second on this board, but yeah. 2017, this one I feel is going to be Jason Tatum, but let's see where it ends up. Yeah, Jason Tatum and Donovan Mitchell taking over. Bam Adebayo a distant third, and then Jared Allen, who some people are surprised, that he got like so much love for, All-Star and whatever. Man, watch Jared Allen play basketball. He's incredible. And De'Aaron Fox there. And I think like De'Aaron Fox also has a chance, like years 7 through 14. This is like the prime of these guys' lives. These guys are all 26 right now. Their primes are still being determined. Obviously, an injury or something like that could certainly derail something like this. So, yeah, we'll see. Luka Doncic is going to be definitely leading this. And honestly, Luka is 6 years, in the league, and he's got 30.6 value replacement. It's probably the closest thing since LeBron that we've seen in the NBA. Shea, pretty much half. The conversation is it's really, really hard to say these two are in the same conversation. Trae Young, you could say is like a very distant third from those two. And I think those two have clearly separated themselves. But yeah, Luka Doncic has been friggin' incredible. And yeah, don't adjust your screen. That does say Luka Doncic Atlanta. They did trade. They traded down. They took him third, and then they traded down. That's going to go down as one of the greatest draft blunders of all time. Ja Morant. Whew. Yeah, this one is also TBD. Wouldn't surprise me at all to see Darius Garland, Nick Claxton, one of those guys, end up like closing out their careers ahead of some of these guys. Zion Williamson, plenty of time for him to turn it around, still in his early 20s. Ja Morant, same story. But yeah, PJ Washington, he had like 43 points tonight for the Charlotte Hornets. He's not catching up to those guys, but would not surprise me if, and ironically, the win share winner for this is Daniel Gafford. That's shocking. Anthony Edwards, this is your draft. Are you leading this draft? No. Tyrese Halliburton is leading this draft, and he has no intention of slowing down. And this is also the draft which produced our beloved, Toronto future icon, Emmanuel Quickley, Will he overtake any of those guys ahead of him? Probably not, unless LaMelo Ball continues to suffer injuries. I think IQ probably finishes top 5. His career will be top 5 in this, but nevertheless, Tyrese Halliburton has got this one on lock, and the pace that he's going, oh yeah, the stat is going to love him. You could still say that Anthony Edwards will be a better player than him, but I mean, it's hard to say. Scotty Barnes, number 2021. Yeah, this is like, to me, it's Scotty. And then I'm going to say a close second is Alperen Şengün and Evan Mobley. And beyond that, I'm sorry, Franz Wagner is not entering the conversation of those 3 guys. But he's definitely a clear-cut 4th. Trey Murphy, probably my 5th. Kate Cunningham, maybe my 6th. Jalen Suggs, it's got a little bit murky after that. It's definitely not Jonathan Kuminga. In terms of the 2022 draft, not a lot of years have been played so far. Walker Kessler currently leading, but this is definitely going to be the Chet Holmgren draft, man. If he stays healthy, he is going to blow this draft out of the water. In half a season, he has almost caught up to a guy who's played way more minutes than him. Chet Holmgren has played 1,300 minutes. Jalen Williams, who is, second in this draft, has played 3,600 minutes. Almost caught up. By the end of the year, if he stays healthy, he will be probably the top guy in this draft, despite having played 1 fewer year. That's craziness. That's going to be his draft. Speaking of a guy who's going to be his draft, this is going to be the Victor Wembanyama draft, dude. Value of replacement, Victor Wembanyama. It's not even close. Next up, Cason Wallace. Next up, Derek Lively. Next up, Brandon Podziemski. Next up, Trace Jackson Davis. Ironically, both Golden State Warriors. Apparently, Steve Kerr does not like to play young kids, unless, of course, they're really good young kids. And Trace Jackson Davis and Brandon Podziemski are really good young kids. A little bit shocked to see Amen Thompson that high right now, given the fact that he has barely played. But nevertheless, Cam Whitmore, Houston, Washington. Well, I mean, really, it's Golden State, Houston, Dallas, OKC, San Antonio. Yeah, this is going to be the Wemby draft. And 2024, we will see. We'll see what happens in 2024. Anyways, give this video a like. I hope this has been somewhat informative for you. Someone asked me earlier, would you ever fall asleep during a live? Honestly, man, I got pretty tired talking. But yeah, we're 1 hour and 27 minutes in. Hopefully this was somewhat informative, especially like the previous parts. But yeah, Crip saying, I really hope Wemby stays healthy. We've never seen a player like him. Hell yeah, man. To anyone saying Bol, Kristaps Porzingis, you really don't understand the game of basketball, man. He's really he's doing some stuff. Cool. Go to sleep, Steven. Okay. Anyways, have a great one, guys. Enjoy your morning. Enjoy your day. If you are a Raptor fan, definitely catch us after the post game. Atlanta Hawks, Toronto Raptors. We'll see what happens. All right. Take care. Have a good one. And make sure to hit subscribe if you're not subscribed. Cheers.